move on to the world of movies, which is weirder than ever, and things are changing on a daily basis. And as we learned, Diana of Themyscira doesn't need an invisible plane to move around, because last week Warner Brothers moved the release date of Wonder Woman 1984 yet again, this time to Christmas Day. And that's just 1 week after the release of their other genre blockbuster, Dune, which dropped its first trailer last week. So my question to you folks is, do you think they're going to wind up moving Dune, and would you feel comfortable being in a movie theater by Christmas? Vanessa, let's start with you.
So I'm all for moving release dates right now, because in addition, like, VOD works and we know it works and it is making money, but like theaters do need something to release when they come back. That's why they pushed the launch of Halloween, but even Carpenter cited it for that reason and was like, we'll remaster the audio, it'll be worth it. I personally don't feel comfortable going back to theaters for a long time for two reasons. All we do is eat and breathe in a box. And I used to be a movie theater usher when I was a teenager, like most people that are movie theater ushers, teenagers. And we shouldn't be trusted on like a regular day to keep things clean. Let alone a pandemic, because the sheer amount of times I've seen a movie theater like usher, concessionist, like use a frozen pizza as a Frisbee, or like move something under a seat and be like, that's enough, because we're teenagers and we're getting paid like $14 an hour at best. Sorry, there's a cat fight going on in the corner. They're fighting in a giant cardboard taco truck. But yeah, I don't feel like that's going to be the place that's like the zenith of sanitation.
Yeah, and well, you're not alone either. Dr. Anthony Fauci is in your corner there too, saying that we're not going to be back in theaters without masks, like back to normal, until the end of 2021. He went on Instagram Live with Jennifer Garner for some reason and said, I think it's going to be a combination of a vaccine that's been around for almost a year and good public health measures. If we have a vaccine that's a knockout vaccine that's 85% to 90% effective, I don't think we'll get that. I'll settle for 70% effective. But if we get a really good vaccine and just about everybody gets vaccinated, you'll have a degree of immunity in the general community that I think you can walk into a theater without a mask and feel like it's comfortable that you aren't going to be at risk. So definitely not a good prognostication for theaters and theater owners, but it definitely makes sense from a public health perspective, because the whole point is you're in this dark enclosed space, eating, like sometimes yelling, talking, like you're reacting to entertainment on a massive scale in front of you while stuffing your face and just particles flying everywhere.
Yeah, and while some stuff works for VOD, other stuff, like, it's the reason Nia DaCosta postponed Candyman. Some movies have to be a communal experience. Some movies are made for the experience of like seeing the way the person next to you reacts. And if it's not possible for VOD, push it.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because, you know, while a movie like Tenet made $200 million globally, it only amassed $20 million in the U.S. and roughly 65 to 75% of theaters in the U.S. have reopened, but major markets like New York and L.A. and San Francisco are still closed. On the other hand, Mulan, which they also used as a grand VOD experiment, only netted $37.6 million worldwide thus far, which is far less than they were hoping to recoup on a movie like that. So my question to the panel is, do you think that studios should do what Disney did with Mulan or what Universal did with Trolls World Tour and make it available as a premium VOD option in addition to putting it in theaters? So Dorian, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that definitely should be the move because as you can see from Mulan, although it didn't make as much money as back as they hoped it would be, you still got to see people. It still was number one on Disney Plus's page, regardless of how much the price was. So if they figure out a way to kind of, not make it $30, $19.99 or something like that moving forward for these different prices for these different movies, I think there is a way to do VOD as well as doing it in theaters. Like you've seen now, just recently they've opened up drive-in theaters to play Tenet. So Tenet is now getting more play in drive-in theaters. I drove to Las Vegas to see Tenet at a theater. Thankfully though, like my theater whole situation was different than most people will be. The theater was closed itself, as well as it was just about 5 or 6 other people in there total throughout the whole theater. So I don't want to say like my experience like was the best experience or whatever, but I got to do that. But the whole time I was wearing a mask, felt a little bit weird, felt a little bit uncomfortable, but after an hour into it, I kind of got used to it. But still, you still have to remove it to drink water and things like that. So I could only imagine. I still felt weird with only 6 people being in there. So imagine, I know they're still cutting it to like half the population and things like that within the theater, but I would still feel weird some type of way if I was in a general vicinity with other people still having to remove my mask, eat, put it back on, things like that. So for me, I personally would rather just go to a drive-in theater, although the audio might not be the best, because I've experienced that with some of the drive-in theaters I've been to past, like the audio might not be the best when it's trying to sync up radio-wise, but I'd rather do that, feel comfortable in my car versus being in a theater, sitting there in a closed room with people like potentially like breathing, coughing, things like that. So I think it is a move to do VOD as well as give it to the theaters that are open and being safe and being precautious, because I do think some movies, like Vanessa said, have to have that communal experience to feel like you're really getting the full effect of what the director intended.
Exactly. And I empathize with theater owners as well and people that work there, because, that's their livelihood. And it can be more expensive in some cases to open the theater. And like, if you're not getting the return on investment from audiences showing up, then you're going to wind up having to deal with landlords, having to deal with overhead, paying staff. Like it's definitely a difficult situation all around. But I saw someone in the chat, Tibby S, saying, I bought the Bill and Ted and Mulan. I'd buy Wonder Woman and Tenet as well. Now, there was a lot of digital hay being made about the price point of Mulan, which was $29.99 in addition to a subscription fee for Disney+. But I'm curious, Ify, what's the most, or what do you feel like is a fair price to pay for a new release of a movie on the scale of something like Wonder Woman 1984 or Dune?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's why I was gonna say I don't think Mulan is the best kind of way to kind of quantify how much VODs can make, because one, it was behind a paywall of Disney Plus, two, it was $30, and three, let's not forget people were boycotting it because the film supported what was going on in China. So that had so much going against it. The price point is interesting because I did buy Bill and Ted, but I actually bought it because you were able to rent it. I think it was like $25, $26, and it was like $30 to buy. And I was like, okay, I'll just pay $5 more and own it. Which, like, I don't know, maybe that was their intention, but I think, the 30 is pretty high, but I think it's pretty high because we're so used to the lower price point of rentals. And I think when you're thinking of you're buying this premium, premiere movie experience, I would like it to come down a little bit, maybe in the 16-20 range. I mean, especially if we're not going to keep it, I think we need to remember this is a rental. But like a lot of people are saying, it's not the end of the world, because when you think of like going to the movies, you add in gas, you add in the snacks you might grab at the concessions, it balances out. And sometimes, in most cases, ends up being cheaper because your boy's going to sit down. I'm going to get the Junior Mints. I'm going to get the big icy. I'm going to get the big popcorn. I'm going to get all of that. I'm going to get the pizza that they were frisbeeing around in the back because I didn't know that before today. And now I have to find a different concession to purchase. And don't get me started if we're going to Alamo Draft House. I'm getting a big ass burger. I'm getting so that's why it doesn't seem wild to me. And honestly, for people who aren't alone, who don't live alone during quarantine, that fractions, people with roommates. For me, it doesn't. If you're tested, come through. You can come sit on this couch with me and watch this movie, see what's popping.
No, but I think that is a good point, that sort of single viewer versus family viewer or group viewer. Like, it makes that price point very different. And I will say this is an interesting point in the chat. The Fulton Ansley Project says, I see most Marvel movies 3 to 7 times. I remember when, if you wanted to own Star Wars on VHS, it was $119. I would pay as much as $39.99 for something like Black Widow or Wonder Woman. So I can definitely appreciate that, because like with Mulan, for example, if you pay that, you are getting access to it the entire time that you have Disney Plus. It's not a just one and done rental, but I think that if you can like maintain that sort of digital ownership of that, it makes a higher price point a little bit more appealing. But otherwise, I'm with you, Ify. I think it's like, if I'm paying over $20 to rent this movie, I don't want to pay more than I would pay for a ticket to go see it.
Yeah.
Like that I can't really rationalize that in my brain, no matter how badly I want to see my favorite characters make things go boom on the big screen.